Summary of I Am Not Your Perfect Mexican Daughter by Erika L. Sánchez. The book starts with 15-year-old Julia Reyes and her parents, whom she calls Alma and Appa, looking into the grave of Olga, Julia's older sister who just died. Olga, who was always the perfect Mexican daughter and Alma and Appa's favorite, was recently hit by a semi-truck while crossing the street to switch buses in Chicago. On the day of the accident, Alma was meant to pick up Olga from her job at a medical office. However, Julia got in trouble at school, so Alma had to go get Julia instead. Olga had to take the bus home. Julia is sad about her sister's death, but she doesn't like how her mother's crazy grief and her nosy aunt's attention-seeking grief are making her feel. Julia's best friend Lorena comes to support her, and as Julia hugs her, she sees a strange man over Lorena's shoulder who she thinks is a very far-away uncle. Alma goes to bed after Olga's funeral and doesn't get up for a few weeks. The house has no food, roaches are everywhere, and Julia's father barely looks at her. Julia tells Alma that she needs to get up and get on with her life. At first, Alma doesn't like being told what to do, but she does eventually get out of bed, take a shower, and make some tea. She sits Julia down at the kitchen table and tells her that she is going to throw Julia a quincera, a party that Latina girls have when they turn 15 to celebrate becoming women. Julia says she doesn't want the party because her family can't afford it and she'll be 16 soon. But Alma won't bend. She never got the chance to give Olga a quince, and she won't do the same thing again. That night, Julia gets out of bed because she can't sleep and goes into Olga's room. She starts going through her sister's things and finds a note that says I love you, a box of sexy underwear, and a key card to a hotel called the Continental downtown. Julia finds Olga's laptop under her bed and tries to get into it, but she doesn't know the password. She puts the laptop under the bed again and goes to sleep in Olga's room. Julia tries to sneak back to her own bed in the morning because she knows Alma will be mad if she finds her in her sister's room. She is found and given a punishment. Julia hates being sent to her room, but she gets in trouble all the time, even for small things. She dreams about getting away from her strict mother and living a free, independent life as a writer in New York, but every punishment just makes her feel worse. When Julia's sentence is over, she goes downtown after school to visit the Continental to find out more about Olga. But the receptionist won't tell Julia anything about the hotel guests, and Julia feels like a failure. She goes to the art museum on her way out of town. Looking at her favorite picture, Judith slaying Holofernes, which shows Judith killing Holofernes, makes her want to find out more about Olga. Julia tries to get information about Olga from Olga's best friend Angie and even tries to Google information about Olga at Lorena's house, but nothing works. But when Julia meets Olga's high school friend Jasmine at a costume party downtown with Lorena and Juanga, Jasmine says that Olga was in love the last time she saw her a few years ago. Julia is determined to keep going in this new direction. Julia can't stop thinking about finding Olga's old high school friends. But as Julia's mental state gets worse and worse, her kind English teacher, Mr. Ingman, starts to worry about her. Julia says she's fine, even though the holidays are coming up and her never-ending spy work is making her stay out later and get grounded by Alma more and more often. The holidays go by quickly, and Julia's strange behavior and angry rants continue to baffle her friends and family. She loses Lorena and Juanga's friendship when, on a field trip, she gets angry at them for saying she's too distant, and she keeps saying no to Mr. Ingman's aid. Julia goes to the community college where her sister Olga took classes to get her sister's papers, but the librarian is rude and won't give Julia any of Olga's information. Julia and Lorena make up, but Lorena, who is worried about Julia, tells her to stop trying to find out more about Olga. Maybe, she says, Olga really was perfect. Julia tries one last time to find out about Olga's secret boyfriend by asking Juanga for Jasmine's number. When Julia calls Jasmine, Olga's friend, Jasmine can't remember anything about Olga's secret boyfriend except that he had a good job. Julia's quinceañera comes. It's a terrible thing to happen. Julia doesn't feel good in her fluffy, silly party dress, and she wishes she could stay in the corner and read a book instead of dancing. When her ta Milagros says something about Olga while talking to Julia in the bathroom, Julia loses it and starts yelling at Milagros for being nosy and passive-aggressive. At the end of the night, Julia's mother and father talk to her about her mean behavior. Alma says that Olga might still be living if Julia had just learned to keep her mouth shut. She is referring to the event at school that forced her to leave Olga and take the bus home on the day she died. Julia and her mother clean houses together during the summer. In the fall, she lets Mr. Ingman help her study for standardized tests and writings for college because she wants to leave Chicago. When Julia gets out of school early one afternoon, she goes to downtown Chicago to go to a shop. There, she meets Connor, a cute boy who talks to her about books and takes her out to coffee. Julia tells Connor about Olga and her useless attempts to find out more about the secret life her sister might have had. She mentions Olga's locked laptop, and Connor offers to help her hack into it. Julia spends more and more time with Lorena and Juanga as the weeks go by and fall turns into winter. She also sees Connor whenever she can. Even though it's been a year since Olga died and she still thinks about her, she is truly happy. Connor asks Julia to his parents' fancy house in a wealthy suburb of Chicago called Evanston. There, they have their first sexual encounter, even though Julia is embarrassed and nervous because of their different backgrounds and social classes. Julia comes home from Connor's and goes to the fridge to heat up some waffles, which are the only food in the house. There, she finds the key to Olga's locked room. She goes into Olga's room that night and takes her laptop, lingerie, and hotel key card. The laptop goes in her bag, but the lingerie goes in a box in her room. When she gets home from school the next day, Alma has gone through her things and found the underwear. Alma thinks it belongs to Julia, and Julia doesn't try to change her mind. She is grounded the hardest she has ever been, and she has to use a pay phone near school to call Connor. She tells Connor every day how bad things are at home and how lost she feels. One day, he tells her that he doesn't know what to do to help her. Julia walks around downtown Chicago in the snow, hungry and broke, feeling lost and alone. She thinks about how hopeless her life is. Julia tries to kill herself by cutting her wrists. The next morning, she wakes up in a hospital bed with her worried parents standing over her. Dr. Cook, a therapist, meets with Julia alone and asks her to talk about everything that has pushed her to the edge. Julia talks about how bad her home life is, how she fights with her mother, how she doesn't think she'll ever be able to achieve her dreams and get out of poverty, and how sad she is about Olga's death. Dr. Cook agrees that Julia has a lot going on, but he says that she can go home the next day if she agrees to a week-long outpatient course and then weekly treatment. Julia agrees, and a few days after that, she starts the rehab treatment. Julia meets a lot of kids her age who are also going through hard times every day. She goes home every night to eat dinner with Alma and Appa. One night, they tell her they are sending her to Mexico the next week so she can get away and spend time with her family. Julia tells another girl in her aftercare program, Tasha, that she doesn't want to go on the trip. Tasha tells Julia that she's lucky to be able to get out of Chicago for a while, and Julia starts to look forward to the trip. Julia sneaks into Olga's room one more time the night before she leaves. She looks through Olga's papers in her desk, hoping to find the password to Olga's laptop written down somewhere. She finds it after a few minutes of looking. She types in the code and is able to get into Julia's laptop and email. There, she finds hundreds of emails that Julia and an unnamed married guy, her lover, have sent back and forth over the course of several years. Julia keeps the piece of paper with Olga's information on it because she wants to use it at an internet cafe in Mexico. However, the bumpy flight there moves her water bottle and destroys the paper. In Mexico, Julia is reunited with her family, Alma's mother, Mama Jacinta, a warm and friendly woman, her aunts Fermina and Estela, who care for her lovingly, her good-natured Chucho, and her cousins Belin, a beautiful girl about Julia's age, and Andres, a kind young man in his early 20s. Julia eats wonderful food, spends warm summer nights outside with her aunts and cousins, and goes to local football games with Bolin, where she meets a handsome young man named Esteban. There is trouble in her family's small town of Los Ojos, though. The local narcos, or drug lords, have started stirring up violence in the area, and Chucho has to pay them often to keep them from forcing innocent Andres into their service. In Mexico, Juliet is soothed by the fact that her family is there, but she is also very aware of the violence that is just below the surface. Fermina asks her how things are going at home one day when they are going into town. When Julia says that she and Ama have a hard time getting along, Fermina tells her a secret. When Ama and Appa left Mexico and illegally crossed the border into the United States, the coyote who led them through the desert raped Ama while Appa was forced to watch with a gun to his head. Julia is shocked to find out that not only has her mother been keeping this secret from her for years, but Olga is not really Appa's daughter. She was born almost a year after they moved to the US, which means that Ama raped her. As the violence in Los Ojos gets worse, Mama Jacinta tells Julia she has to go back to Chicago. Before Julia leaves, Mama Jacinta begs her to take good care of Ama. Julia finds a stash of beautiful drawings that Appa made when he still lived in Los Ojos the day before she leaves. She puts a couple of them in her bag to bring back to her father. When I get back to Chicago, things are a little bit better. Ama is glad to see Julia again and says she's sorry things have been so hard between them. Julia can't even look at her mother because it hurts her to know something she doesn't want her mother to know. When Julia gets her phone back, she can call Connor, who tells her that he has been very worried about her for more than a month. They decide to meet later in the week downtown. On her first night back in town, Julia sneaks back into Olga's room and starts reading the emails she never got to finish. The last email, which was sent just a day before Olga died, says that Olga was pregnant with her lover's child. Julia goes to the hotel where Angie works to find her and ask her about Olga's secret. She is angry and confused. Angie takes Julia out for coffee and tells her that she always knew the truth about Olga, but she didn't tell anyone, especially after Olga died, because she thought the truth would hurt everyone. Later, Julia runs into Connor, and they decide to keep seeing each other on a casual basis until they both go to college. One afternoon, Julia takes the bus to Olga's old office and sits in the waiting room, not sure what she's hoping to find. She has figured out that Olga's boyfriend must have been one of the doctors at the office. When the strange guy from the funeral walks in and the receptionist calls him Dr. Castillo, Julia sneaks out and waits for him in the parking lot. When he comes out at the end of the night, she questions him. He offers to take Julia to a diner and tell her everything. Castillo tells Julia at the diner that he really did love Olga and wanted to leave his wife for her, while Julia orders a big meal. Julia yells at him for not doing anything, but Castillo says that Julia will one day understand how hard relationships can be. He shows Julia a picture of Olga's ultrasound, and Julia leaves in anger. Julia is doing well in treatment, and her new medicine is making her feel better than ever. She gets a full scholarship to NYU and tells her parents that she wants to go there. They are sad that she is going, but they back her choice. As the weeks go by, Julia talks to Dr. Cook about her problems and hangs out with Connor behind his back on the weekends. She will soon have to go to New York. She says goodbye to Lorena and her parents with tears in her eyes, and as she boards the plane that will take her to her future, she welcomes the nervousness and confusion she feels about what's to come. She thinks about how the trip she took to learn more about her sister taught her more about the beautiful and ugly parts of herself.
About the author. Erika L. Sánchez was born and raised in Cicero, Illinois, a working-class suburb of Chicago, after her parents came to the United States from Mexico. As a child, she was strong-willed and liked to read. After Sánchez graduated from the University of Illinois at Chicago with a Phi Beta Kappa and a magna cum laude, he was given a Fulbright scholarship to study and write poems in Madrid, Spain. After her time there, Sánchez went to the University of New Mexico and got an MFA in creative writing. In 2017, she published her first book of poems, Lessons on Expulsion. I Am Not Your Perfect Mexican Daughter, her first book for young adults, came out later that same year to great reviews and was a finalist for the National Book Award for Young People's Writing.
Hope we summarized it fully and you liked it. Please hit the like button and subscribe to our channel so that we are motivated to create more videos.